love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to another croaky SDAQ&A. I'm your host, Peter Dixon. My special guest is Grenville Kent. How are you today, Grenville?
I'm so relaxed, Pete, after all that music you've been playing. It's
I know.
I had in the zone, I tell you.
I had the extra long intro because we've got so many links today, and I thought I'd better double check this and check that. So thank you, everybody watching, for your patience. We're starting a little bit later than I'd hoped. But it's great to be here, and it's good to see the regulars watching there and chatting. And our topic today, I'll just bring it up, and then I've got a quick little couple of small announcements to make for what's coming up. God, is there any evidence? And I guess we're springboarding from your recent book, which I have bought, and
I'm $2 richer. I'm glad to hear that, Pete.
yes, and
I can barely sit on my wallet thinking about it. It's knocking me sideways. My goodness.
I want to contribute to the production of more books.
Good.
That you might have coming. Where are we going here? I'm trying to find out what's going on. Here we go. So it's called God Walks into a Bar. Read out the subtitle for us there, Grenville.
Evidence for and against faith.
Awesome. And that's available on Amazon. Now you
Amazon
can get
Kindle, yeah.
and Kindle.
Or
Yeah.
Amazon. Yeah.
And I bought the Kindle version, and within seconds it was in my inbox, and I began reading. And there's lots of interesting questions that were popping into my brain, and we'll get to a lot of them today, because a lot of I guess people who are Seventh Adventists, or people who leave Adventism but remain in the Christian modality, a lot of people at some point will question the existence of God. And I know you and I have done that. And when I left the Adventist church, and I've said this before on the show, I felt that unraveling of all my beliefs. And I felt that none of my belief claims could be substantiated anymore. As I gently flowed into the arms of agnosticism, I grappled to still have some kind of identity with the life I'd been raised. And for me, it was just grabbing on as I slipped past the bottom rung to the four Gospels of Jesus and his teachings only. I thought, I won't look at the supernatural, I won't look at the miracles. I'm just going to hang on to that. And in many ways, that has rebuilt my faith. It has rebuilt how I approach community building, friendships, I guess, in the broader sense of friendships. And I guess the theme that really is consistent throughout what I like to do is to find common ground. And I know that a lot of people watching SDAQ&A are atheists, agnostics. A lot of people have all kinds of spiritual connection, belief systems. But I think all of us can actually come together on this common ground. Teachings of Jesus, four Gospels. And so everything outside of that, I just go, okay, hey, I'm not able to substantiate stuff, but I love talking about it. I love this topic. And I think Peter Veach might be watching today, and I know he's got questions. And those who have never thought about this topic, I'd love you to respond as well. So we're going to dig deep and just look at this interesting conversation. God, is there any evidence? And again, just to encourage people, go and check out Grenville's new book, God Walks into a Bar. And I haven't finished it yet, but I'm into it, and I'm really enjoying it. So I encourage people to get behind our local authors and have a good read. Have you met Matt Cortman at all? He's explored some of these topics before. I've interviewed him.
I've read him, but I haven't had the privilege of meeting him yet, actually. I must go to some more conferences in the US, but it's been a bit hectic.
And his book, Saying No to God, has been quite an interesting read as well. So people watching today from all spectrums of not only the Christian reference point from all over Adventism, Christianity, atheism, agnosticism, and I love that we've got a diverse group like that. But let's go back a little bit, and quick plug for this week. Tomorrow, our Good News Fellowship program. Remember, everybody, it's on a different channel now. It's not here. We've got our own little home, and you can go and find that on YouTube. at Gospel Good News Fellowship. And our special guest tomorrow is the very popular Clinton Baldwin. So he will be preaching or presenting tomorrow. So that'll be this time tomorrow, wherever you're watching from. Next week, we have on our Thursday and Pacific time, USA Wednesday, 6:30, on Andrea McMahon. She's watching today. So, Andy, let's get ready. And the day before, Tuesday, Pacific time, California, and Wednesday, lunchtime here, we've got Dr. John Butler, who is going to chat a little bit about his chapter in this book, Reclaiming the Prophet, that as soon as it was released, within about 6 days, the White Estate pulled some strings and Pacific Press had to take it down from Kindle, take it down from Amazon, take it down from all the ABCs, but I managed, Grenville, to get a little copy. And
of course you did, Pete.
Yes, of course. And I really enjoy a friendship with John Butler. And I interviewed him and Ron Numbers and replayed that the other week. I don't know if you got a chance to watch that, but it was like a comedy show. You could just tell that they delighted in each other's friendship, and because they're both so witty. Sadly, Ron Numbers, who wrote, as you know, the Prophetess of Health.
Prophetess of Health.
I thought it was interesting that they used the same Ellen G. White image on both those books. And that's an amazing book. Sadly, Ron Numbers has passed, but John Butler will be on the show next week. So tomorrow, Dr. Clinton Baldwin. Next week, John Butler. Then Andrea. And then we have a special program inserted later in the evening with John Rosier, who's going to do a show on what Adventism could have been. So I'll tell you what, it's all happening here. But let's go back.
So you've got all these international guests, Pete, and then today you've got the bloke who lives one good golf drive from your house, and our daughters are on the same football team. So
I know. Isn't that incredible? Incredible. I remember, at school pickup, we'd often bump into each other and, have 5 or 10 minutes to shoot the breeze while the kids all came out. And our daughters have been in the same class at different times and played in the same soccer team. And
little Nene the other week, smallest kid on the field, and she got player of the match. She was indefatigable. She just chased everything. I was like, yes.
She is.
So she's got her father's grunt and her mother's as well.
Yeah, she'll get her eye on something and just doesn't give up. And I've said, well, honey, just maybe, you're welcome to come and sit off for a little bit. No, she just gives it everything. So it's good to see. But you and I go back. We were at college together. In fact, you gave me a wonderful compliment once. I was trying to write songs and sing at college, songs that kind of had a little bit of depth, not just, oh Jesus, let's come and gather, and I thought no one's going to notice some of these more. And I'd released a couple of cassettes by that time. I thought, but no one's going to be looking at the lyrics or listening, and they'll just want the happy clappy sort of praise songs. But
I'm a lyric junkie.
Once.
I love lyrics.
You came to me once and said, look, I really like some of your lyrics in some of your songs, and you literally quoted some from one of the songs, and I thought, wow, it kind of inspired me to keep going.
Good. So that's good. I'm glad to hear it. I do remember the funny ones too, and the serious ones. Yeah. So
yes, the good. Beagles.
And I think we've been at a few youth camps together over the years as well, doing our thing, our respective thing.
I also remember once you graduated, and we're going to go into me shutting up and you telling us your story, but I'm pretty sure you were involved with a lot of university work and chaplaincy.
Yeah.
And that, I remember at the time, I'm not sure if I should mention names or not, but there was a few people I hung out with, and they had a band and whatnot, and they said to me, wow, we've left Adventist schools, college, we're now at uni. The big questions are being thrown at us, exactly the one like the one we're talking about today. And
Yep.
I didn't realize it then, because I would sort of swoop in, do some music, and you'd have camps and whatnot. But I do remember these three particularly saying to me how much they appreciated that you were there to help answer some of these questions. And it's interesting that probably you and I, even at the time, may have been having our own questions as well. But when you look at the big picture and you're trying to help people answer questions in a safe environment, I think you were able to provide that for them. And I guess maybe the seed of your desire to write about this sort of stuff, talk about this sort of stuff, may have grown from those sort of conversations. As a lot of Adventists, the rubber was hitting the road at uni, where they were asking big questions.
Big time.
So let's go back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you studied, some of your career path trajectory. Bring us up to the moment, and then we'll get into the book.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Well, I started out at uni, and I didn't have a faith at that point at all. I was on the run from my parents' quite sincere gospel-based Christian faith, Adventist faith, but I just wasn't interested. And through a number of factors, sort of like a divine conspiracy, I think, looking back, it just all clicked for me. In first year uni, it just hit me. There were some Americans there on campus doing apologetics, giving reasons for the faith, which I'd never heard in Adventist churches. Whether that was my fault or theirs, I can't really say whether I was listening. But they just came with a whole bunch of fresh reasons why you could believe in God. And that's what really got me thinking. So I walked out of university and went up to study theology. All my friends thought I was a nut. What's going on? Why are you going to this monastery to study? They all said. But no, that was a big moment. And since then, I guess I've been, uni chaplaincy, youth pastoring as well. And then I went sort of, I've done a bit of film production on the side of that. And then also got into the academic thing. I just sort of got curious and wanted to dig a bit more into theology. So I've taught in that for about 15 years. And so right now, long story short, I'm teaching casually at 2 theological seminaries for 2 Christian denominations, Baptists and Churches of Christ. I guest a little bit in Adventist seminaries as well. And I'm also teaching history and science at a school on the Northern Beaches in Sydney. So that's the slash in my job title. Yeah. Aside from being the parent of 6 kids.
Yes.
And also being married to a phenomenally interesting and talented musician and academic. And that makes for a really, I consider myself very lucky, Pete. I jump out of bed and pinch myself and say, this is a good life. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
And can I mention your wife's name? Is that all right? Because I just wanted to
Alita King, absolutely.
Yeah, so Alita is very talented. And I remember taking the girls to 2 shows that she was involved with. One has just escaped my memory.
Sound of Music, probably?
So, yes, that was it. And
Joseph, maybe, more recently?
And the Joseph one more recently, yeah. And just absolutely fantastically run and arranged. Like, as a musician myself, you watch someone in that role and you go, hang on a second, I just know all the things they're having to juggle to make it sound that good.
Yeah, too right.
And even with the arrangement, the thing, like I could just tell the little tweaks to chords and all that kind of muso stuff. You can really see that she's got this incredible talent. And my daughters saw that first one. The school took kids down for the Sound of Music for a special, I think, daytime matinee program. But just at the end, and my daughter's on the edge of her seat, this is incredible. The teachers are like, on the bus now, we're going to get back to and so she missed that last little bit. And I thought I must contact Alita and see if they videoed it at all. So if you're watching, Alita, maybe I can get a link for my daughters. And they've gone on now to be in some musicals themselves.
Fantastic.
Renee was in Alice in Wonderland. She was Alice, and Ruby was the March Hare. And so, yeah,
awesome. So much fun.
Yeah, so much fun. So I thought I'd throw that in there because, I can see that she deserves a little bit of, a comment there.
Absolute
Yes.
champion. And she's dragging me into the whole world. She loves classical, especially. So she
Mm.
drags me off to the opera house and teaches me all that's going on. It's like having your own private tutor. It's
Yeah.
so much fun. I'm watching her enthusiasm for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hoot, actually.
Yeah. I'll say hi from me. And
I
look,
will.
let's talk a little bit about the book. It's interesting to
Yeah.
note as well that in the in its category, it's up the top there. I think it even might have hit the #1 spot at some point
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
Christian
blow me away.
philosophy. Yeah. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. And
Thanks, mate.
you know, so God walks into a bar, and it's the evidence for and against faith.
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe the book for us? Give us a bit of a overall description.
Yeah. Look, I've just met so many people who would love it if there was a kind father who would look after them in this life, catch them after their death and take them somewhere nice and just give them bliss and make up for some of the suffering and nonsense that goes on down here. But in many cases, they don't think that there's a valid reason to believe in that. They're often blocked by suffering, or they're blocked by sort of just hasn't science explained everything that we used to think God did and all that. And so I really just wrote the book for them to say, actually, there is a bit of evidence. I was surprised when I was coming to faith how much there is. And I've just tried to, I guess, summarize it up with a bit of a laugh, because some things are sort of far too important to be taken seriously, too seriously. And just to give the best arguments I can find for people like that. And if they have been Christian, or in many cases have grown up with no faith, but a bit of a wonder. It's funny, I met a lady on the train coming back from Sydney the other day, 70 years old, had worked as a hooker, had been a heroin addict, like a really colourful past living on the street, but she had a formidable brain. And when she found out what I did for a living, she said, oh, we had this brilliant discussion on the train, and she's asking me all these questions. How can there be a God? When? Blah, 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 blah. And she really wanted to know. Like, she's 70, she knows she hasn't got forever, and she's sort of going, is there any reason for hope after I die? Is there anyone that might have been watching me all these years? And I think people are curious, and I'm jolly curious too. And so yeah, that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
I've been asking those questions and interviewing people, dozens of atheists, Christians, agnostics, Jews, Muslims, and also taking talks at uni campus. You get up and hang up a thing, kind of thinking person believing God. Lunchtime talk, everyone comes in, and there's gracious discussion. We haven't had conflict in Biff, but people are really curious to know, is there genuine evidence, or are we just believing in Santa Claus, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I was in Melbourne at a retreat doing some music, and I was in the city, and I could hear this big kerfuffle, and there was a bunch of what I came to realize, like an atheist convention going on, and there was a Muslim contingent there with, you know, placards saying you're all going to hell, kind of thing. And there was a bunch of the atheists singing always look on the bright side. and I remember in my naivety literally going up to some of the Muslim folk, just walked up to the crowd with my phone and said, do you mind if I just do a little interview with you guys? And so I had these interesting chats there, and but anyway, I went inside, and there you were talking to Sam Harris, and I thought, and I think we might have seen each other and
I said good day. I remember that.
catch, and it's that inquiring mind. It's funny, I didn't at all think, all right, Grenville's gone over to the dark side. I thought, oh, here's another person with an inquiring mind chatting to people, and I think you went on and did some work and met a lot of these interesting guys like Dan Dennett and Sam Harris and these guys. And that whole movement was an absolutely fascinating. One of the guys that spoke that night, Dan, you'll know him. He was on Oprah years and years ago. Dan. I've forgotten him. Anyway,
Daniel Dennett was there, but
Daniel Dennett. This is it, Dan or David? My brain's gone to mush. But anyway, he was Barker. I can't remember.
Good God, they were all there, the big
Yeah,
names.
yeah, and
Ayaan
he,
Hirsi Ali, I remember talking
yes,
to,
she was there. Yeah,
although she's since become Christian, interestingly.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
fascinating to hear her story as well.
Hmm.
Definitely an interesting trajectory she's taken.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
It'll come to me. But anyway, I interviewed him on one of, in lockdown, on one of my. I was doing lots of shows just to keep alive, keep because no more gigs.
Yeah.
It might have been Dan Barker. Anyway, I'll have a think.
I don't know. I'm just googling while you talk to me. I'm just
Yeah, have a look. And I interviewed his wife and as well on a separate occasion. And
Dan Barker, American atheist
Dan
activist. I
Barker.
must have missed that name, Pete.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dan Barker. That's it.
there
Um,
we go.
And so, I'm fascinated in talking to people of all walks of life. Anyway, so
There you go. Was an evangelical Christian preacher and composer. Wow.
yes,
So he was you and me.
and when I
Hmm.
interviewed him, he was talking about how he still gets royalties from some of the musicals he wrote that they still use at summer camps and whatnot in the
Oh,
States.
that's
And
ironic.
yeah, he still gets a lot of cash each year. And he just thought it was funny that was the still happening.
Yeah, right.
What was that moment like? So you've got all this kind of fertile ground for researching and writing this kind of a book. Interest, inquiring mind, meeting interesting people, talking to kids who are transitioning, talking to kids who are suddenly faced with some pretty confronting big questions. So I can see who it's for. It's for all these other people that have inquiring minds as well. Um, but what kind of was the seed of you actually going, I'm going to write about this? What galvanized you to that point of I'm going to write a book about the evidence of God?
To be honest, it was for my oldest daughter. She hit first year uni and she went, I'm not sure if I believe all this stuff anymore. I was like, okay, good, start questioning. And so I wrote it. I've dedicated it to her. And I haven't got her review on it yet because it's only just come out. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was really, it had that personal thing to it to say, righto, here's your old man's best shot. See what you think.
great.
And it's just the other thing. I find that a lot of Christian preaching is focused up sort of at the high end of the pyramid, but not much down at the foundations. Let's be devotional about Jesus. Okay, good, love that. I do. But what about down at the bottom? Where's the foundations? Why do I believe in a God at all when there's
Mm,
so much suffering, when there's contraindications and all that? So that's where I really wanted to focus my
mm,
attention. And I don't know any. I don't. There's a few good books you can read. Some of them are super nerdy. Some of them are for teens. I just wanted to write one, I guess, in that first year uni sort of demographic. Not too nerdy, but not too light either. Sort of like a
yeah,
sanitarium breakfast cereal, if you
yeah,
like.
yeah. Jane Krause just wrote, this sounds really interesting. I think more young people are asking these questions than people think. And I think she
Yeah.
is 100% right there. And as you just said, what they tend to be fed from the Adventist perspective are Adventist apologists, overly scripted, naive in many ways responses and answers. And
Yeah,
and
I don't
and
know any. I don't know
and
any apologists. They
yeah,
do prophecy, they do devotion, they do creation stuff, creation evolution,
yeah,
but they don't do the big philosophical arguments
no,
for it.
no,
In my experience, not
no.
one that I know
They're,
globally.
yeah. When I interviewed George Knight, I steered, and I guess Matthew Cortman as well. Uh, and their focus is definitely not this. But when
Hmm.
you engage with clever scholars with PhDs and academics, you can't help going, "Oh, here's an opportunity to ask some hard questions." And I remember asking both of them some questions, and particularly George Knight. Like Matt sort of embraced it, but George had this big pause and went, anyway, back to what we were talking about. And at another point, he said, oh, you're asking the wrong questions. And I thought, wow, asking the wrong questions. That's an interesting
You'd
thing.
love that.
Yeah,
Could see
exactly.
your wow.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, I've said this many times before, sorry to bore people, but at the end of about half an hour toward near the end, I said to him, I'm a street epistemologist. I'm just asking what you believe, why you
Mhm.
believe it, and can you defend it? I'm not trying to get you to be an Adventist apologist right now. Just chat about what you. And he went, oh, I wish we'd realized that at the start. So there is a willingness, perhaps, for some, maybe three, to engage in this sort of thing, but none have actually put anything out. None have really done anything. So it's as Jane just said, more people are asking this than we realize. And so it's an important conversation for kids to have. So yeah, it's great that your daughter was questioning. Great how you responded, and you've kind of written the book for her to ponder and look at. Yeah. So how long did it take to write from that moment of the seed to it actually coming about?
From that moment, probably 4 years. But you could say it took 20 years, really, because I've been asking these questions for a long time. But no, probably 4 years to get it part-time, to get it all out and together. It's funny, I think people are asking it a lot because they look at atheism and they go, it's pretty sad, it's pretty despairing. No one loves the little children, the children of the world. No one hears them when they cry, no one hears what catches them when they die. No one loves the little children of the world. That's sort of the atheist version of it. And you sort of go, while some of my friends and dear relatives who are atheists have managed to piece together some meaning in their lives and enjoy it, I often wonder if it's because of their atheism or in spite of it that they manage to have meaning and joy and stuff. Because if you read the atheist writers on face value, man, they're pretty honest about what it is.
Yeah.
And they all say that it's sad. That doesn't mean it's wrong. We might just have to face those sad realities. But I think there's something in us that intuits, that just sort of goes, hang on, surely I don't have this big frontal lobe and this quest for meaning for it all just to have no meaning. And surely I don't get to older years with so much experience and love and experience in me and knowledge, and then that's it. Surely.
Yeah.
I think people sort of hate that and rebel against it, even if they are atheists.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, what we're kind of wired to have this cause and effect and search for meaning. And if you discover that there's no real big picture meaning, at least you can go, well, maybe there's a reason that we believe in these kind of supernatural tropes or beings to help communities stay together. Like people gather around these beliefs. And nature, the genes, remember Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene, nature doesn't really care what gathers people together, but it does want people to gather together so it can reproduce its gene into the next generation. So there's all sorts of places to land when you discuss and think about this. And in many ways, we just want to have a sense of meaning and purpose. And
absolutely,
in watching, say her name again. Ayaan
Hirsi Ali.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali. It's fascinating how she is talking about becoming a Christian, and I know that part of it is that, and I've seen Richard Dawkins drill her on this, but I know that part of it is that she realizes that community needs to hold together or gather together around a belief system. And she values the Judeo-Christian Western civilization with all its faults and flaws and incredible inconsistencies and terrible things that it has placed on people. It has also learned to flip itself and go, okay, well, we want to improve things. And I think she sees value in that. So I value and respect her decision to become a Christian again, and I can probably read between the lines. Same with Jordan Peterson, that maybe it's a little bit more metaphorical, but either way, it's still grounding their life narrative around a belief in God.
Exactly. It's funny. She even 15 years ago in her book, she would say, because she came from obviously the Islamic world outside of the Greco-Roman, whatever Christian thing. And she comes in and she says, look, if you've become an atheist to Islam, she said, I find a lot of people that miss God. They reject Islam and they miss the idea of God. So she said, all right, try the God of the Anglicans. If I don't miss God, she said at that time, but if you do, try the God of the Anglicans, because he doesn't have an eternal hell, and he doesn't punish, and he's gracious, and that's a better God. I remember thinking, man, here's an atheist telling ex-Muslims that the Rowan Williams God is better than. It's like,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah.
So she's been quite an open mind for such a long time, I reckon.
I think she is such a valuable human on this planet that is very, very brave, incredible woman. What's that first book she wrote with her on the cover?
Infidel.
Yes, Infidel. What an amazing book. Yeah. So just as we're going to dive into the book, I want to just go through chapter by chapter. I've at least done a little bit of a research on each chapter and look forward to digging deeper. But just before we go into that, you're a creative person, and you mentioned a few things that you do for a living. Is it your hope to perhaps make a living eventually from just your writing and your books, and maybe do the odd special guest appearance here and there? What are your thoughts on moving forward as a profession?
I guess I've tried to I've tried to distribution maximize, not profit maximize on this book. I just want the ideas out there. I don't expect to make a living or a profit out of it. It's really just for the fun of it, to be honest. If someone wants to pay me to write and be a professor or whatever, great, sure. But I just do it in my leisure time for fun.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a passion project, really.
Yeah.
And I think my last book, it was well reviewed, and I think so far I've made $64 out of it or something. So, yeah, whatever.
That's what I was going to say. Artists and creatives, boy, it's hard to make a living.
That's right. And listen, Dan Brown or J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I look back to when I, embarked on, the decision to make a living as a musician, 33 years ago, and then lockdown kind of put the bookend. There was the start and the finish. So I still do lots of music, but it ended a very routine approach to making a living. And and I look back, I think, wow, I actually did it and I survived. But I don't think I'd recommend anybody to try and make a living in the creative arts. It's I think be a weekend warrior, and
exactly. Get a real job and then write on the side.
Get a haircut, get a real job. But
not a haircut, Pete, no.
But one of the things I think, which you can probably gravitate towards and understand and appreciate, is that even though there's no money at anymore, there are ways now with social media to really get your material out there. There's a guy that pays me a little bit each week to help him with his platform, and he's got, I think, nearly 3,000 members, and he does a gospel program each week, and he'd be pushing 76 maybe, and he doesn't want to make any money, but he just loves that he's got thousands of people watching his material. And it's such a good way to approach, I think, anything with the creative arts. Is now you can actually get a wide audience but make less money.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
we did a book. Phil Rodioff and I did a book on the Da Vinci Code years ago, and we decided to give it away for free on the internet, just because we could. And this guy from Lebanon, he told us he gave out 40,000 copies to his mailing list or whatever. He was a big trucking company over there. It's like, what? And we just got those sort of numbers from all around the world, and you just think, man, here's people reading this stuff for free. That's so cool. These ideas that I love and that sparkle in my mind are getting out there, and people are potentially hooking onto them. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
well, look, let's
that's cool. I'll drive a Toyota and do that.
Yeah, do some Uber driving.
That's right.
Well, let's dive into the book. I've written down some questions here that we'll look at and read.
No worries.
And let's explore each chapter briefly, and I think, and in many ways, begin the conversation. I don't think this conversation is happening anywhere in the Seventh-day Adventist realm, and even though I'm a former Adventist looking in from the outside, there's former Adventists that aren't looking into this. So you know, right off the bat in chapter 1, you talk about that you were agnostic, even atheist for a while. Can you
Yeah.
just explain and define those terms? Some people say, agnosticism, the word was introduced to make atheism seem less hard and a bit more palatable, but
Yeah.
essentially they're so close in meaning. But give us some of your thoughts on that. And why, and then perhaps go on and explain why you walked away from that book.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So I'd see a scale,
Sorry,
Pete, from up one
from
end,
that view. Sorry.
from that worldview. Yeah. Yeah. From up one end, you've got sort of hard atheism that says there is no God. Then you've got agnosticism. Hard agnosticism says there probably isn't a God. Soft, open agnosticism says, I don't think there's a God, but I'm open to evidence if there is any. Then in the middle, I guess, would be I guess a soft, open agnostic might be in the middle. And then you start to get towards theism, where you have to I guess a soft theist. I think there's a God, but I'm not too dogmatic about it. Right up the other end to a scary fundamentalist who says there definitely is, and he talks to me, and you're wrong.
Yes, yes.
So there's probably a
I
scale
like
in there.
that. Yeah, I like that. A spectrum.
I don't want to go too far up the scale. I want to
Yeah.
just stay sort of floating high, but not too high.
On either end, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as a I guess an important thing to define at the start of this conversation, I guess, is which God. When we say
Yeah.
that we are, what the question of today is, God, is there any evidence? Which God? Share with us your
Great.
thoughts on that.
Great question. Look, for the first 2/3 of the book, I don't even really argue which God. I just say, is the mainstream Western scientific secular materialism true? Or is there a spiritual domain, a God, gods? So Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, or not so much Buddhists actually, but some Buddhists, Baha'is, Christians, Jews would find major common ground with all of that. I don't get to the Jesus phenomenon until the last 4 chapters, because I'm trying to keep the discussion as open as we can. And many, like I've used in there, arguments from Jews, from Muslims, from Christians to make the case for God. And for the first 2/3, I don't ask which one it is. I just go, is there a big kind face up there, or faces even?
Yeah.
So that's and then I look at the Jesus evidence specifically. But a lot of this stuff would apply, and I've discussed it with rabbis and imams and whatever, and had massive agreement actually. I noticed you before we're talking about common ground. There's huge common ground in just basic theism, first of all.
Yeah.
And let's go there first. As a culture, let's have that discussion.
Yes.
I think that's more important than trying to pin down which denomination or which whatever. And could I just say up front, the question of God to me is very much different from the question of church. I think a lot of people have divorced those two completely.
Yeah.
And I have too, even though I do church or churches. I probably speak on a Sunday more than I speak on a Saturday, but that matters a lot less to me than people connecting privately.
Yes. Yeah. And then publicly the common ground stuff. And I think you're right. In what we've established is our sort of Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christian Western civilization, there is definitely a loose sense about what God is. So I guess in answering that question, the which God, as a reference point for this conversation, we're referring to that generally common held God of the Christians and the Jews and
Plato and Aristotle.
Yes. And we might come to it a little bit later, but I'm also interested in when people defend that God. I'm very interested in how they have defended that God based on their rejection of Odin and Thor. Like, have they used the same kind of deep questions that they've used to reject Odin to keep this Christian God that we have? We might be able to get some time into that later.
That's a beauty. That's a good question.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
Because a lot of atheists will say, I've only rejected one God less than you have. You've rejected all the other ones.
Yes, yeah.
No, that's right. It's I guess you'd say a kind, moral, intelligent, powerful being. There you go. So we'll start with that, and I think most religions will nod to that.
Yes.
In the opening, the opening discussions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they want it to be a God that they can interact with, not a deist God that kind of set everything in motion and then said, off you go, guys.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and that belief on its own, regardless of the evidence and empirical data that you can use, that simple collective belief of that kind of a God that you just mentioned actually makes for a more cohesive community. Sure, it can
It
lead to
does.
some pretty disastrous outcomes, but as you mentioned, you don't necessarily want to be on the real, I'm right, you're wrong, God told me, and now I'm
No.
coming over it with a steamroller to roll you down. There is a balance there, but generally speaking, those who have a reasonably Anglican, benign kind of belief in a loving God that cares for you, you just notice, and this is often a topic Jordan Peterson talks about, I think, where you notice that the actual community is kinder and nicer. If you've established this is the God we believe in, he cares for us and is loving. Oh, look at that. And so
Yeah.
I think even Richard Dawkins recently acknowledged that, there's communities and belief systems in the world that he'd rather be a Christian if he had to choose.
Yeah.
And look,
Yeah.
that's open for
He
discussion.
named that community quite frankly, didn't he? He
Yes,
really
he did.
put the finger down. I won't
He
say it,
did.
but
Yeah,
yeah. And then he said, "I'm basically a cultural Anglican, and
that's
a
right.
cultural Christian." And
Cultural
you go,
Christian.
"Whoa!"
I know, that blew me away.
Yeah.
But I think
So
there is a lot of it doesn't mean that of course there's problems in Christianity and there's things you can point to, but generally speaking, people who believe in a benevolent God that wants the best for them manifest that in how they interact with other people. So even if your only belief claim was okay, well, that's the God we choose to believe in, and this is the effect it has on our lives. Cool.
yeah,
Run
yeah,
with that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
No, exactly.
in the chapter 1, the book describes you coming to faith for yourself in that first year of uni. Tell us what
Yeah.
happened, and can you just define faith as well?
Yeah, faith, I guess, for me is the logical conviction that there is a God and that he cares about me and us. And also then deciding to act on that myself, deciding to act as though that's true. It's not a sort of a fluffy, illogical, it's not a close your eyes and leap into the unknown. It's not that. I'm not into that. I want it to be rational and believable. I'm not saying I can prove there is a God, but I think there is evidence pointing, and I think the evidence is not beyond reasonable doubt, but it's at least on the balance of probabilities, I would say. For me personally, I guess it was there were a couple of things going on. Number one, I was getting the intellectual arguments from university lunchtime meetings taken by these American Christians, and also from my uncle, who was a pretty sharp dude, and he was giving me reasons. He was a logical scientist. He was a surgeon, and so he had that scientific bent where it was like, okay, prove this. Here's the logic. So that helped. But also experientially, Pete, I got to say, everything was going right for me in that first year. I was on cloud 10 as far as career, academic results, friends. I was running a small business and about to buy my first sports car at 18, and I was doing well by all measures, and I was happy. But my mum, God love her, she used to talk about this God-shaped gap in the human heart, and she'd say, every heart, quoting the French philosopher mathematician Blaise Pascal, every human heart has a gap in it, and it won't be filled. You've probably heard this until you respond to God. And I'm going, oh, Mum, yeah, okay, thanks for that, 17th century concept. But and I can remember this one night driving home from a party. Everything was going right. I had no cause for depression or anything like that. But I just had this sense of nagging, is that it? Like, is that really all there is? And I sort of, it just hit me that there's got to be something more. And I remember saying, look, okay, if Mum's right and you're up there, then can you please connect with me? Can you please show me? And then I thought not much more about it and just cranked up the music and just sort of went home and fell asleep. But it just nagged away at me. And it's funny. I was reading atheists, and I was trying to be a good atheist, actually, or a good agnostic, and it just wasn't quite working for me. And I sort of quote in the chapter there some of them. The one who really pushed me off the edge was Bertrand Russell. You know, right? Brilliant Oxford philosopher, mathematician, brilliant guy, a proponent of free love back in the 1920s, by the way, and therefore banned from a lectureship in New York because they were shocked at his lack of morals. Interesting guy. And he says, and here's the quote that just nailed me. He says, "I believe that man, his origin, his growths, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental co-locations of atoms. So all you are is a bag of chemistry, all these random atoms flying around. That's all that makes up you. And everything you feel, do, think is nothing more than just chemistry." Now, of course, we are chemical beings, but that's all he's saying. That's classic materialism. And he says, no heroism, no intensity of thought or feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. That's it. Death wipes you. All the labor of the ages, all the devotion, the inspiration, the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system. And the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. And you go, that's clinical depression. Like, that's really sad if you believe that. How do you get up in the morning and go, woohoo, I'm going to live a positive life, knowing that's hanging over you? You know, it really got me. And then I read, and then people asked him, how do you cope? And he says, what else is there to make life tolerable? We stand on the shore of an ocean, crying to the night and the emptiness. Sometimes a voice answers out of the darkness, but it is the voice of one drowning. And in a moment, the silence returns. The world seems to me quite dreadful. The unhappiness of many people is very great, and I often wonder how they endure it. The life of man is a long march through the night, tortured by weariness and pain towards a goal that few hope to reach, and none may tarry long. Is that the best you got to offer me? Like, seriously, I'd want to go out and jump under the number 5 bus if you really try to live that. You know, it may be cool to say it in a philosophy tutorial, but how do you live that despair and that stuff? You find as much pleasure as you can. I mean, you be a good hedonist. Probably my favorite atheist, Epicurus, 300 BC. He'd say that you're going to die, your atoms are going to fly apart. So in the meantime, get as much pleasure as you can, and then die. And that's it. That's the attitude Paul satirizes when he says, "Eat, drink, be merry. Tomorrow you're dead." You know, he's sort of summarizing Epicurus. And you read those parts in the New Testament where Paul debates with Epicurean philosophers, and he talks about Jesus and resurrection. He talks about eternal life where there's infinite bliss and growth and enjoyment and stuff. And he's going, I can trump Epicurus. I've got Jesus and resurrection, you know. And I got to say, both intellectually and emotionally at that time, all of that just sort of came together for me, and I just went, okay, that's what I need. That's what I need. There's a bunch of arguments as well going on, the science stuff, the philosophy stuff. I can tell you more about that. But just to start with the personal, that's where it all sort of came together for me at 18. Yeah.
That sense of, boy, if there isn't a God, my life feels meaningless. And, yeah, interesting. I hadn't realized that Paul was debating, and it makes sense now when I've read those passages, that you can see that they're coming from that perspective, and he's having a discussion with them. So just share again your definition then of faith, because as you branch from that decision, that moment where, look, there must be more, I want to throw myself under a bus if there's not more. I don't want to just live for no meaning, pleasure, die. Is the next point needing to find evidence and needing to define faith, or did you just go, well, I'm just going to live as if that's the way? I mean, you strike me, you know, that you would have gone, I want this, but I also need some evidence.
Precisely. Yeah, I was 0% interested if it was just another Father Christmas story. You know,
yes.
We all got over that by age 5 or 10 or however old we were. You know, and there's no point believing in some fantasy just to make yourself feel better. I would have zero desire to do that. So, but I must say that personal, emotional, intuitive thing drove the search. But if I didn't find any evidence, I would have gone, oh well, too bad. I'm a Epicurean. I'm a hedonist. I'll party till I get old and then die, and that's the best I can do. But yeah, then I went looking for, and I was getting really good talks in these lunchtime meetings from these pretty sharp American, I forget who they even were, sharp American apologists, basically going through all the classic arguments for God and making it make sense. So that was also going on at the same time.
Was there a reason? So a lot of people that come to this point seek other forms of meaning that may not necessarily be supernatural. For example, Taoism and Buddhism, at their original core, weren't teaching supernatural beliefs. They were teaching paths to a better life. They weren't pushing the pleasure hedonistic vibe, but they were saying you can have a happy life, follow these tenets, or in the case of Taoism, here's some thought processes that might trigger some deeper understandings. What did you explore those kind of searches for meaning that aren't just hedonistic? So at the moment you've talked about either there's a God or there's not. If there's a God, that leads me along a pathway of a bit more meaning. If there's not, it's just hedonism and pleasure. But maybe there are other options. Had you looked into Taoism and Buddhism as paths that didn't have to be supernatural, even though many have made them into supernatural movements, but at their core, they weren't, and they precede the Old Testament and the ancient Judaistic writings.
True.
Tell us about if
no,
you
they do. Good
that.
question. I did have a chat to the Buddhist group on campus and had a big old chat to them on a number of occasions because that's quite a popular worldview, isn't it, in the West? I won't say religion because it doesn't really teach there's a God. Where I tripped up with Buddhism was that it has an idealistic philosophy at its base. In other words, all of this world of the physical is just imagined. And it's all in our heads. And if we just learn to disconnect from our desire for things, I mean, you know about Buddhism, the idea is suffering. Suffering's at the core of things. And I think they're onto something there. You know, there's a lot of suffering's the major reason why a lot of people don't believe in God. But for me, Buddhism is saying if you can just change your thinking and not desire certain things, separate yourself from desire, then you'll overcome suffering. And that works to a certain extent. But I guess I was interested that Buddhism was so popular among scientists, and I think it was because it was just a total opposite. Scientists are into materialism at work, and when they come home, it's almost like idealism has a lot of appeal because it's just leaves all that behind and is in a totally different plane. Whereas I guess what I wanted was it all to be integrated. I sort of thought if there's a God, that God would have surely made the world and the physical world would be part of the whole situation. I wouldn't have to leave that reality behind. And do you know what I'm saying? And so respecting friends and relatives who are Buddhist, that didn't have appeal for me as much. The other big winner later was grace. I mean, the idea of grace, that I can be forgiven for mistakes I've made. Whereas some religions, and Buddhism, to my understanding of it, makes me pay for every last penny of mistakes I've made in as many lives as I need to pay for them. I just sort of thought, knowing me, I'd never get it done. I'd be paying for the sins of 973 lives ago, and I'd stuff up in the next life, and I'd be, oh no, here we go around again. How long till my soul gets it right? You know, that's what made Buddhism not seem my cup of tea.
I mean, I can hear what you're saying there, and in some ways you're choosing an interventional God, as we mentioned earlier, as opposed to a deist kind of God. Why do you think you went down that pathway, an interventional God and a Jesus who died and for your sins, etc., as opposed to a deist pathway? I think William Miller was a famous deist who did change his views on that, but I think at his core you can still see in his teachings quite a deist approach, and the second coming for him was now God being involved again.
Yeah.
Why do you
Deism
think
is
he
classic.
went? Yeah,
Neil Armstrong, another famous deist, up there on
yeah,
the moon, going, "Okay, you made this, but you don't care about us now. You're a pretty bad dad. You know, you made us and then nicked off."
yeah,
So, yeah, deism. A lot of early Americans around the time of the Constitution were deists as well. It was pretty
yes,
popular,
yeah,
and I believe their reasoning was, look, it's clear from the design argument that there's a lot of design in the world, and we have souls. That we're more than just physical machines, and that's what they would have thought. But
mm,
there's so much suffering, and God doesn't seem to do a darn thing about it.
mm,
So maybe he's left. Maybe he's watching us from a distance. You know that song.
mm,
That's
mm,
sort of the concept of deism. And
mm,
if that's the case, I think that goes to God's character. Like what kind of puts of a father would do that? Oh, I made you, but I'm not interested in you anymore. It
mm,
just didn't.
mm,
I wouldn't. I'd want to. I'd want to have it out with a God like that and say, "What the heck are you doing?" You know.
mm.
So that one didn't appeal much, to be honest.
I quite enjoyed. I've still got a copy of the Jefferson Bible,
Yeah.
and where he kind of, in many ways, when I was having my identity crisis and faith crisis, that was my go-to book to rebuild um, the common ground. You know, because he gets rid of
Yeah.
all of the miraculous and all the contradictory. I think he literally got his Bible of the day and cut out bits and then pieced them all together in one book, and eventually it got printed and he'd hand them out to family and friends. But that's a good starting point at least. I mean,
Genius of a guy, Jefferson, man. You know,
yes,
I disagree with him there, but I just have to take my hat off to how much of
yes,
a polymath he
and
was.
and you know what? I think that's a really good point to raise. I don't think we have to go, oh, I don't like what they said there, so I can't take on board anything they've said.
No.
Like, for example, Sam Harris, some of the stuff he has said, I just totally disagree with. But
Mm,
sometimes he says things that you go, whoa, I haven't thought about that before.
yeah,
Jordan Peterson, the same, even Richard Dawkins. Some
yeah,
of these guys, I'm not the kind of person, and there might be people watching who disagree, and that's all right. I'm not the kind of person that goes, okay, just because someone has a flaw or a fault, or they've done
mm,
stuff,
mm,
or they say things I disagree with,
mm,
doesn't mean that when they do something that resonates with me and aligns and seems rational and can really hold its ground with evidence and rational
mm.
thinking, you don't have to throw them away. I think it's good to be able to
Exactly.
say I enjoyed Jefferson and a lot of things he did. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's a healthy move away from polarizing, and the world's very polarized at the moment.
yeah, isn't it? And it's like, okay, we're in two camps. That's it. You're in there. You're my enemy. I
Yeah,
hate that.
yeah,
I've, sort of like, don't want to belong to either camp. I want to range around
yes,
and talk to
yeah.
people and
And, and I think
form
people
opinions.
incorrectly say, "Oh, you're just cherry picking." No, you're using your brain to
Mm,
discern things that are
mm,
rational, of value, build
mm.
community, and just aware that people are flawed and some ideas don't add up. That's
Yeah,
okay to do that.
yeah. I love
Before,
Sam Harris. You mentioned him. He's a
yeah,
gentleman. He's got a strong morality. I don't agree with all of it, but he at
no,
least he has a solid belief that there's right and wrong.
yeah,
He's yeah. I interviewed him once and had a chat to him afterwards. Really enjoyed the guy. He was jet lagged out of his nut, but he was still
yeah,
courteous and logical, and he was great.
yeah,
It's funny in that interview, the person who arranged it, after we'd had a chat, something or other came up, and she found out I was a Christian, and she went, "Oh, what?" She actually said to me, she blurted it out. She goes, "Oh, but you seem nice and logical." I was like, "Well, you don't know me." But then I thought, isn't it funny that she thinks, anyway,
yeah.
thinks that would be a surprise?
Once you're labelled, along comes
Mm,
the pigeonholing.
yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah,
annoys
yeah,
me and it's we do it naturally. We all kind of do that. Now,
yeah.
before we jump into chapter, did you define faith? Did we forget to come back
Um,
to that?
yeah, I haven't really got a definition written down. I guess I'd just say that it's a logical and intuitive belief that there is a God, that He cares about you, that you want to relate to Him.
Mm.
Um,
That doesn't
that's at least that's my
necessarily
version of faith.
doesn't have compelling evidence that so it leans into a bit more of a choice, faith, believing in the unseen kind of thing. Is that what you're suggesting?
Look, I know that's one definition of Paul, but I guess I'd say faith for me has to have, it has to be on the balance of probabilities. There has to be at least some logic pointing in that direction. Otherwise, why would you have faith at all? And why would you have faith in that particular God?
Would you say, sorry, carry on.
No. I was going to say Pascal's wager. Well, if you don't believe and I do, I've lost nothing when I get to the end of my life. I get afterlife. But if I don't believe, well, okay, good. But that wager can apply to Santa Claus as well. If you believe in Santa Claus and I don't, well, maybe I'm going to miss out, Pete.
Yeah.
I don't buy that one. That one doesn't convince me.
Either. Yeah. Would you say probability and plausibility, like, are you seeking probability or are you seeking plausibility when you seek evidence?
Plenty of things no, I'd go for probability as a higher standard. I want it to be pretty likely true. Otherwise, why would you make yourself a bad hedonist? If it's not true, I want to go and be a hedonist. That's the best option. Epicurus, if there's no God, Epicurus is about as good as it gets. Friends, comfortable place to live, material pleasures, peace, tranquility, calm, all those things. That's what you should aim for, right? He's right, if there's no God. But if there is a God, you'd be aiming for things like service and generosity and sacrifice, and you'd make very different choices. But you'd be a nut to make those if there is no God. Why turn yourself into a bad hedonist if there's no theistic reward in life and at the end of it? Why? And I wouldn't have done that.
Would you say, though, that definition of faith could be used to defend any belief claim?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to include other people's faith in my definition, because
like even Odin, for example, like the Vikings with their belief in Odin, they would use all the same examples to defend their belief in God, the God we're talking about today, demonstrably different to. In fact, many say that the Christian God defeated Odin with much of the activity that eventually brought down the Viking kind of culture. But wouldn't they defend with faith the same way a Christian would defend their
they probably would
belief claim?
They would defend it. I'm not sure they could make historic claims about Odin coming to Earth and visiting people and historical evidence of that. But I would say I've got more in common with an Odin, with a Viking who worships Odin than with an atheist. Probably, at least we've got a god. We've got the same stump at the tree.
Yeah.
And interesting when you look at the history of the Vikings, it's Harold who brings Christianity there. Why is it so popular? Because Viking women got a pretty rough time in the afterlife. It's great to be off in Valhalla, drinking and eating big chunks of beef and wenching with the hot chicks up there. But where does that leave your wife? And so one of the major reasons Christianity spread across the Viking culture was the women going, hang on, that afterlife is a raw deal for us. Yeah. This Christian one sounds so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they already had the God basis there, and so they just sort of switched a few details. So that argument of, you don't believe in Odin, well, I do share a lot of common ground with an Odin worshipper. And so it's not that you don't believe in Odin. I do believe in our God as the Odin worshipper does. I just believe in different characteristics of that God.
Yeah, interesting. It's also interesting, like, and I've heard this posed recently by, I think I wrote it down. Oh, no, I haven't, but I think it's Alex O'Connor. He was saying, why is someone's location of birth a reliable indicator of what faith they will choose and grow up with? And that seems to me to indicate that perhaps the God meme or the God belief is really just one that is passed on generationally and accepted because our parents told us, than how you've been questioning it in your book, with more of a, hey, what's plausible, what's probable, where's the empirical data, that flies a bit in the face, and that's I believe how it should be approached. But when you look at the world, the apple doesn't fall from far from the tree, so to speak. For if someone's
Yeah.
born in a certain part of the world, that's a
Mm.
very reliable indicator to predict what faith they will follow. Why do you
Yeah.
think that is? If God is genuinely trying to reach out and connect with us, why not do it in that more rational, logical, probability kind of structure that you and I perhaps explore it?
Yeah, there's two great questions you've asked me there. One is the geography of religion, basically, and I guess that comes down to the fact that we trust our parents often, and our parents, if they're good people, hand on values and things to us, and we go, yeah, that works. I've seen you do it. I love you, and so we take it on.
Mm,
Again, I'd say there's probably more in common between the various versions of God around the world than there is opposing, and that it probably underlines the importance of parents in terms of transmission of values and faith. On the other one, you're sort of getting onto the argument from silence. The fact that God, why doesn't God reveal Himself to everybody immediately? Why doesn't He go to that guy who's waiting at the bus stop out there right now and say, "I'm here, I'm God, believe in me, live forever"? Why doesn't He? Why is He so silent? Why doesn't He
mm,
just reveal Himself unmistakably to everybody? And I think that's a very good question as well.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I mean, look, the answers in that might lie in the direction of sort of leaving free will, of God saying, look, if I just came and blew you away with all my revelation that you didn't ask for, that might be a bit unfair. Using my power against you.
mm.
I'll put hints out there. I'll leave enough evidence so that you've got clues from the natural world and everything. And if you then go looking for me, great. Here I am. You'll find me easily, but I
Mm.
won't force myself on you, sort of thing.
Yeah. It's interesting though that when studies show that people will believe anecdotal evidence in the face of definite scientific empirical data, you'll have an old long held belief based on feelings and anecdotal sort of evidence. Someone comes along and says, no, we can actually prove that wrong. I think it's
Mm.
why even something as simple as washing your hands with water saved millions of lives eventually in hospitals. But when that evidence and scientific fact became known, I think it took 25 years for people to actually
Yeah.
infuse it into practice. And I
Yeah.
guess I think if God, I'm not asking that God should place in us, like, yeah, give us free will. You don't just come along and say, believe in me because here I am. I don't want that kind of evidence. But why has He created our minds in such a way that we believe, like the people who most often are the fundamentalist kind of Christians are the ones who, oh yeah, He spoke to me last night, I believe it and don't question it. They're the ones with the
Yeah.
least kind of logical, rational thinking. At
Mm.
least God, why didn't God place in us a desire to rationally think through things? I'm not saying
Yeah.
produce the evidence that we just go, oh, we can't question it, it's so clear. Why didn't He at
Mm.
least? So the evidence is that our minds are created to believe BS over fact. Um, why do you think He didn't create us to have more logical, rational minds?
Look, I guess it comes back to, I guess the biblical case would be that He did originally, but that our first parents mucked up some pretty major decisions, and the human race has, in a sense, fallen, whatever that means. And so now we're led around by our lusts and our pride, and we make decisions that are not good for us just because it feels good in the short term. We're very short term in our thinking, often
Mm,
very
mm,
selfish rather than us. I think about me, and that's just part of being a fallen human being.
mm,
And in some ways, it's like, I guess looking back on my own journey to faith, it's like God had to get the WD-40 out and just, spray it into the head of Gren that was
get the cogs
rusted
whirring.
up. And exactly.
Yeah.
And to me, that's part of the action of God through the Spirit, is that He does
Mm,
that stuff and in a way frees a person up to be most themselves, lets them get out of bad death spirals and habit loops that they've
mm,
created, and lets them actually breathe free and make decisions and have
mm.
actual choice. Yeah.
I'm not banging on about Buddhism. It's definitely not a barrow I'm trying to push. But when you look deeply into early Buddhism and what its original founder was trying to teach, it's not about letting go of desire. It's about letting go of craving. It's not about
Mm,
disengaging with community. It's about realizing that we are very foggy with our logic and rationale, and we have to then put in place certain disciplines to then produce the outcomes. And so there's a tendency for some Buddhists to overdo good deeds, but the traditional Buddhism is not saying do good deeds to get to nirvana or to have another good life. They
mm,
don't. The traditional Buddhists don't teach past lives. They don't teach nirvana.
mm,
That's kind of been appropriated and taken over down the track. But these spiritual leaders, and Lao Tzu, who possibly was a, a culmination of 400 years of studies from a monastery somewhere in China, not actually one person. The studies of Taoism also aren't about a supernatural. They're about trying to live a better life. Now, their teachings, the first one is, if you think you know the Tao, you don't know the Tao. And so you're going to go away and ponder that, you go, oh, okay, what does that mean? So that it's a series of very short little statements and questions to make you think, but all designed to have a better life. And I think
mm,
in some ways where I'm going with this is, if you can get to the core of your culture, what they believe at a real core, get rid of all the irrational stuff. What was some of the source? What was some of the source material? You can often find a very healthy modality that essentially we're all seeking better lives with our partners, with our friends, with community, with nature. Um, in many ways, when you look at, so I'm not pushing any of those different things, but mentioning that it's a pretty strong indicator where you're born. Maybe part of this for you and me searching the Christian God is searching
mm.
our culture. What is our collective belief when we cut to the chase? What are the things there that give us a better life? And I think that Buddhism, Taoism, definitely not all the great religions at all, but there's a few in there that really do seek a more abundant life, which Jesus, you know,
Yeah,
came to offer. Now
no question. Yeah.
we're at the end of chapter 1, so let's go into chapter 2. And
Okay.
just
Yep. Yep.
quickly before we do, I'll just bring in a couple of questions and comments. So we don't lose them in the mix. Fred Simmons writes, I can hear Peter's rooster crowing out the back. He needs a name. It's actually Darren Pratt's rooster, not mine. 10 meters that way is
Oh, that's your neighbor. Yeah.
yeah. Let's call and often Fred, there's Darren will have 6 roosters. Sometimes he's had. So the current one, let's call him Henry. Andy writes, I'm still at the point where I now know what I don't believe a lot more than what I do believe.
Okay.
Peter Veach writes, a kind, moral, powerful being that commands, commits, condones immoral stuff. Is that the God's variant you believe? Not compatible with an all good God? What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, sure. If that God condones or commands immoral stuff, then he's not compatible with an all good God. I think Peter might be thinking about some Old Testament passages that are controversial and that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, some of the so-called genocidal passages in the OT. Tell me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think that's where you may be going, just from Facebook discussions that I've seen. And yeah, I think you've either got to say that stuff's immoral and chuck it out, in which case the whole Old Testament falls over, or you have to find a way in which it is moral within its culture, or maybe it's the least worst alternative of what's going on there. But that'd be a whole hour. That'd be a whole week's discussion in
Discussing
itself.
that. Yeah.
Mm.
Brian So what is immoral? And that's a really interesting question, because a lot of atheists discuss that, and they talk about, if there's no morality garnered from the Christian gods, collection of moral teachings, how do they arrive at moral behavior? And what's his name? Oh, I'm having mental blanks.
Sam Harris, The Moral Landscape.
No, but that's a good
Causing
one.
suffering to any sentient being, causing suffering to any aware
Yeah.
being, that's immoral.
Yeah,
Or causing unnecessary suffering, I think it is.
Yeah, that's a good one. And the
Yep, that's not bad.
there's a general thought amongst atheists and agnostics that they do need to come together with an agreement of what is immoral, and it might only be for their part of the world. And I think the Christian view is that you've got just a more of a, here's the template, we've been using it for a couple of thousand years, that works for us. So there's, for those who are agnostic or atheists, that they've got to come up with some kind of a manifesto, in a way, to be able to move forward collectively as a community. And in many ways, the hope of the new atheists that we're talking about, that when we were at Melbourne that time, maybe that's 15 years ago, I don't know, but the hope that was kind of there, it has lost its way, because within the atheist communities, they have not been able to agree on a collective moral standing. And so they are very divided. In fact, I started a YouTube channel called, what was it called? I can't even remember what it was. It's where I interviewed Dan Barker and his wife, and oh man, my brain. Anyway, it fell to bits because the various free thinkers. It was called Free Thinkers International, and it survived maybe 50 interviews, and that's it. But I was interviewing these really interesting people, and it just imploded because there was no common ground amongst. There was common ground in their non-belief and the notion that we can't find, there's no conclusive evidence of any god. That's the common ground, but they couldn't find a common ground on how they would run certain moral social,
you're absolutely right,
practices, and it just imploded. I was quite surprised. I thought I was on the cusp of having a really interesting community show kind of thing, but it just imploded.
The problem is that some atheists are moral realists and some are moral relativists. Like the traditional atheist position for the last 100 years has been there are no morals. There's no such thing, because how could there be? Just think of the story. The Big Bang blew out a whole lot of particles into the world. They congealed into planets and oceans and the first life form and evolved into people and stuff like that. Who's writing the rules for that? And you might say, oh, well, it's for the betterment of a species to look after each other. Yes, but only to the extent that I'm going to look after my genes before your genes. And if helping you helps me, well, I'll do it. But, the whole selfish gene concept is to be taken very seriously. And so you have a lot of atheists going, there are no morals. I could quote you dozens of them. Philip Adams. You've got here J.L. Mackie, Australia's homegrown atheist. There are no objective values. If there are objective values, they make the existence of a God more probable than it would have been without them. Thus, you have a defensible argument for morality to the existence of a God. And so atheists are saying, we can't have morality in our story. But more recently, atheists have come along, like Sam Harris is the classic for it, and I take my hat off to the guy, and he said, of course there are morals. Of course there are objective, timeless, ever true morals, like causing suffering unnecessarily to another conscious being. And he says, of course there has to be objective, real morals, because otherwise you can't say that rape is wrong, or that murder is wrong, or that torturing an animal just for the fun of it is wrong. Putting your blowtorch on a fur seal would just be your preference, and I might not like it, but that's all I could say. And so that's the real rip down the atheist camp is, are you a moral realist or a moral relativist? And it probably, I think it starts a really interesting discussion, because if you're a moral relativist, well, that sounds non-judgmental and tolerant and sort of, what would you say, sort of humble, but you can't condemn child abuse and terrorism and some of the, the things that really are stuffing our world from that platform. You can only say, I don't like them. Whereas if you're a moral realist, you've got a bit more traction and you can say, no, these things are objectively wrong. And so Sam Harris wants to go there. But here's where I build an argument in chapter 6. And I sort of say, well, look, these moral realists, I'm a moral realist, and I think that's the only position. In fact, I remember a uni session I was taking one lunchtime, and I said, this girl she'd come from, let's just say, a religion that had left her with a bit of guilt and a bit of sexism, and she felt rejected by her religious family. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I think the way you treated was wrong, objectively wrong. And I said, can I ask you, is rape always wrong? And she was smart. She went, okay, if I say it always is, you're going to say that's an objective moral. And then you're going to say you can't get objective morals from nature, society, or the individual. You can only get them from God. And you're going to use it as an argument for God. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. That's exactly. And she said, well, of course, rape is always wrong. But just hang on a minute. Just let me think about the implications of that. If I say that, well, then what I'm actually signing up for is to say, you can't prove that from nature, because there's rape in the animal kingdom. There's lots of forced copulation in all different species. Horrific thing, but it's true. You can't get it from societies, because there are societies today, parts of Pakistan, where it's just part of life. You can't get it from the individual either, because there are individuals who have those sort of beliefs that those rape myths, something like 10% of men would commit rape if they had the opportunity. So the individual can't make up his own morals. So where do we get that objective moral? There's only one place, and that's to get it from a belief in a good God. And this girl, she basically, I talked about that and she got it, and she was really struggling with the idea. Do I say there are no morals, or do I say there are morals? And if I say that, that pretty much points me to a God. So that's the moral argument. Tick chapter 6, Pete. We just did it.
Yeah. I'm just looking through some of the. I'll just bring up some as either comments or questions. Nellie writes, ultimately, one believes where the good or better payoffs are, what works for you, what sits better with you. A healthy, balanced view of life suits me. Peter Veach writes, objectively verifiable evidence, still waiting.
Okay.
Sir Nilo writes, Jordan Peterson argues that God is the highest myth, but that we must strive to be God-like. Peter adds, stars make themselves. Hydrogen accumulates by gravity until sufficient mass generates heat and pressure to ignite fusion, and a star is born. Point to the bit, God did it. I guess he's talking a little bit about the God in the gaps, sort of, where people often go, well, I can't answer that, so God must have done it. And he adds, ouch, interventional. Rubber hits the road. And this is back a little bit from what we were chatting earlier. Rubber hits the road. Please present evidence for that assertion. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I guess we're talking there about the argument for religious experience, the argument from religious experience. And either one's own experiences or other people's reported experiences with God would be the way to demonstrate any intervention. I think Peter would probably agree with that. If God has intervened, Peter's saying he has no evidence for that. The only evidence for that could be, and please argue with me, Peter, by text or however you want to do it, the only evidence could be if people, either I or others, have reported encounters with God that we find credible. And if it's me, I'd be asking, have I been manipulated? Am I on drugs? Am I seriously mentally ill? Are there reasons why I should doubt my experience? Or even if it's someone else, I'd be asking those same things. I'd be asking if they had a profit motive or a bias or a reason to lie, etc. Or if they were credible witnesses. And if they were credible witnesses, I'd be going, okay, tell me what you saw, what you felt, what happened. And in the book, I tell the story of the lead pilot at Pearl Harbor, Mitsuo Fuchida. He hates Americans, and he's all about the Bushido code of hate and vengeance. Then he, over time, long story short, he loses. He sees the three carriers sunk at the Battle of Midway. He goes back to Japan as a hero, but he realizes we're going to lose the war. And then he sees Douglas MacArthur on the deck of a ship in Tokyo Bay decide to when they've defeated Japan, MacArthur turns around and says, we want to build a future based on forgiveness and peace and respect for all people and all this. And he's blown away because here's this Presbyterian Christian American saying, basically, we thrashed you in the war, but we're going to forgive you and we want to build a peace now. And so he's sort of going, whoa. And he hears about this woman who has had both parents killed by Japanese soldiers, an American Baptist missionary's kid. And she goes back and does all she can to make life good for Japanese officers in this prison camp. And he's like, why would anyone do that? And it messes with his head. And to cut a long story short, he comes to Christian faith because he just feels a sense of God calling him to that. There's no others pushing him that way. He just comes to that on his own. And I guess I'd say, is that a knockdown arm wrestle proof that there is a God? No, it's not. But could it be evidence of an interventionist God? If that guy's saying, God appeared to me, changed my attitudes, gave me a whole new view of things, made me feel a lot better about it, gave me a sense of forgiveness for old enemies. Okay, that's got to at least be some evidence of a God. And he had no motive to do that. He actually copped rubbish from his previous Buddhist mates in the Air Force who said, what's wrong with you? You're just sucking up to the Americans by adopting Christianity. He said, no, I'm not. Americans aren't giving me any money. I'm just doing it because I think it's right. And our whole Bushido code of the ninjas hasn't served us well. The Christian code of love your enemies, forgive your enemies seems to make a lot more sense. And I'm trying to do it. And it's interesting when you read his own comments about it and sort of find that, okay, there's somebody who claims to have had an interaction with God. Can I believe them? Yeah, I think I can. And if that's true, well, that at least starts me thinking that maybe it's possible for anyone to be open to that sort of connection with God. I admit it's subjective. I admit it depends on the testimony of others. But that's probably the best way I'd start to fish in that pool, is to say, what people are there that claim God has intervened, and can I trust them? And you're probably going to say, Peter Veach, if you're listening, you're probably going to say, what about all the times God doesn't intervene? And that is a very powerful argument. You know, it sort of mocks it. You know, like, oh, I'm glad that God answered your prayer for some small thing, when, you know, last night 10,000 African children starved. You know, that's really good. And Jesus deals with that one in his teaching. He says, you know, do you think that that Naaman, the Syrian, he got healed of his leprosy, but not every Syrian did. In other words, he deals with the fact that just because not everybody gets an intervention doesn't necessarily mean that an intervention isn't true. So there's a few thoughts anyway in response to that.
You've got me thinking that it would be great maybe in a couple of weeks to just have a conversation with you and Peter here together. I'll just kind of moderate it, because I don't want to get off track with talking about the book. But
that's okay.
Yeah, you and he both raised some really interesting topics there that would be great for conversation. An interesting thing at the moment, what's it called? I looked at it earlier. Oh yes, the 3-1 Atlas comet is going, well, it's out of view now, but it went out behind the sun. And there's another comet, I think, C2025, that's in our skies at the moment, potentially closer than the moon. So that's an interesting thing too. But this 3-1 Atlas comet, I don't know if you heard about it at all, but there are people making claims that on that comet, it's actually it's a galactical alien spaceship. And there's a galactical council there communicating with people on the Earth. And I've literally, like, you know, I play a lot of music into the New Age community, and there's a lot of discussion about that. And I've been there listening to people making some pretty big, bold claims that they are connecting with the Galactical Council, that they've been given some information. And I guess that when we talk about the kind of the Pearl Harbor scenario and people's testimonies, and you've got to still somehow bring it back. And I think it's what you are doing, is bringing it back into, well, what is that collective moral agreement that we have? So you might make a claim that someone's having a connection with the Galactical Council or whatever it is. But I think you've got to, if the pathway you're suggesting works as some kind of evidence, you've got to be able to step back and go, well, can the evidence be suggested that by this person's belief and actions, the general good of the community benefits? But then I guess those talking about the Galactical Council, they're talking about how the world is literally on the steps and the edge of becoming a much better world if we follow the teachings of the Galactical Council. So I guess Peter might suggest that isn't strong evidence because so many people can come up with those kind of claims, I guess. And what is that saying that, big claims need big evidence or something?
Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll sorry, Peter Veach, but we'll bypass that conversation, which I would love to have, mainly because we want to go through the book titles and explore Grenville's latest book. But maybe in 2 weeks, the both of you can come on the program and we'll have a civil conversation about this, because we're just talking about ideas. And I think you'd both have a really interesting conversation that could continue on the process of talking about this stuff.
Pete, can I quickly respond to one of Peter's other comments, which actually brings us in one of the chapters anyway? Is that cool?
Yes.
You made the point about the genesis of elements in stars and stuff like that, right? And just for the non-scientific, the theory is that inside a star, hydrogen gets turned into helium, and then bigger elements get formed inside those furnaces of stars. And it's a fascinating project. And Peter Veach asked in there, where's the God did it step? I can't point to a God did it step any more than I can say, where's Henry Ford under the bonnet of my Ford? He's not there, but maybe the processes and the mechanics that he set up are still working fine. And there's one interesting comment on that. So Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist, who came up with the term Big Bang, it's really interesting when he looked at that. He looked at that whole stellar nucleosynthesis thing, right? The formation of chemicals in stars, and he Google it up. Google the triple alpha process if you want to know more detail. But basically, he looked at it and went, "Hang on a minute. These two helium atoms collide and form beryllium, and then before that sort of decays, another one arrives. The odds of that happening to make carbon are incredibly low." And he said, I'll just quote him here. He said, "Some super calculating intellect must have designed the properties of the carbon atom. Otherwise, the chance of my finding such an atom through blind forces of nature would be utterly minuscule. A common sense interpretation of the fact suggests that a super intellect had monkeyed with physics, as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question." And Hoyle spends the next half of his life looking for God, in Eastern religions actually. But he's on this quest because of what he saw in the carbon atom and in that synthesis process within stars. He went looking for God. And so I guess I'd say, no, I can't point to a particular step and say, God did it here. But what I can do is look at the overall whole thing and go, man, maybe someone set up some constants and processes and things that made the whole thing work. And I can get up in the morning and go, look at that massive fireball in the sky, 2 trillion Hiroshimas per second. I'm just the right distance from it. And by the way, it's belting out heavy radiation that would just fire a shotgun through my DNA. But, oh, look, I live on a planet that has a lot of iron in the core, and therefore it has a magnet sitting around the planet. And that bats away most of those big, heavy radiation particles, and so they don't kill me. And I can go up to the North Pole or down to the South Pole and see them, flying by in the thinner magnetic field there. in the auroras, and I can go, gee whiz, was that luck, or was that an intelligence, some super intellect? And I can listen to Hugh Ross, and he goes, he sort of adds up some of those factors that are life on Earth, and he says the odds of them happening by chance are 1 in 10 to the 311. Okay, that's how he calculates it. And so I guess our two choices overall are either chance did it, or some super intellect monkeyed with the laws of physics. And I'm going with the super intellect. I'm not saying you're dumb if you go with the probability one, but the odds of that seem to me so low that the other solution, which is some kind of God, and hey, I admit it doesn't prove it's Jesus, it just proves that there is some super intellect. I think that's equally defensible, and for me, probably more likely. So I know it's hard when you can't respond except by text, but I just wanted to sort of respect that comment that he made before, and sort of unpack chapter, what is it, 2, some of the content in there.
And Peter, if you're still watching, I think you are. Comments are coming through. Get in touch with me and we'll organise a chat, because I think it would be a great conversation. It's interesting when you look at, so like you just said, it's not necessarily confirmation of which God. It could be an incredibly dangerous God that's just messing with us, that has put it all into play. And this interesting when you look at, and we're just asking questions and chatting, but anything we talk about, this doesn't mean we're making a claim, by the way. I found that sometimes by asking questions, I remember I once said, have we thought through the Damascus Road vision, and Paul used to kill Christians? Could this be a new technique for totally changing the and negative, like a Trojan horse? Could Paul have been a Trojan horse? And I was just asking the question to have a discussion, and instantly people, so you don't believe in Paul anymore. So this is a conversation. As Andy Mack just commented, I realize I know nothing on this subject. By asking these questions, we're all learning and we're just sharing ideas. But it's interesting when you look at AI and you look at human behavior, and and people say, and I agree, that AI doesn't have a sentient, reality. There's not a metacognitive sort of thought process going on. But you look at humans and you look at what humans say and what they do, they don't marry up. And so you could say that humans, the bulk of humans, their behavior, generally speaking, is functioning at a real primal, reptilian brain kind of way, where we often do things that are almost out of control in a way. We based on our emotions and whatnot. And so there's a parallel between how a human actually thinks and behaves the same as an AI, which I've heard people extrapolate that we could be living in a simulation, and the God that runs this simulation, like all the same questions, all the same support, all the same, he showed me, all the same connections to it, it's designed actually play out identically. And that's a whole other fun side topic. But it to me, it all comes down to, how is this making my life function better, improve? How is community improving? How are we growing in kindness and civility and connections, and water's flowing nicely and electricity, all of those things? To me, it really does come down to that. So Nilo writes, is it possible to be a Christian but jettison all the supernatural? And a part of me just in this moment thinks that maybe yes, but I'm interested in what Sir Nilo thinks. Grenville, you can comment on that, but we'll get back to some of we'll get back to the book, and I'm talking to Grenville Kent, and he has just released this book. I'll bring it up onto the screen. God Walks into a Bar, and it's looking at the evidence for and against faith and you can get it very easily on Kindle. I bought it the other day, just did the I think it was one step, boom, was in my phone. And it's a really provocative and interesting read. I'd encourage you guys to go and check it out. And in its category, I think Christian philosophy, it reached #1, I think, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So well done. And
Probably
we're
based on the good looks of the author, I think that must be.
yeah, it must be. Yeah, I noticed
Yeah.
your face is not on the cover. What's going on there?
I know. Well,
You're not doing the Phil Collins trick of facial recognition. We're all wired with more synapses
right.
to recognize faces. And we're discussing today, God, is there any evidence? And it's a fascinating conversation. And we're just sort of going through the book. And we did look at chapter 2 a little bit there in indirectly. Was there anything you wanted to talk more on chapter 2?
Yeah, I guess the big thing with chapter 2 is, and it asks the biggest question you can ask, where did the universe come from? And people sort of go, oh, how could we ever know anything about that? You know, goodness me. And what's it got to do with our lives? But it's just sort of interesting. And I guess one way to think about the cosmological argument, which, by the way, is as old as the Greeks, it's a few hundred years BC, is to go, righto, Earth is big, our sun is 1,000,000 times bigger, and Betelgeuse is 1,000,000,000 times bigger than that. So there's some massive things out there, and they're moving in very precise ways. And you've got to account for that. The mainstream scientific off-the-rack view is that they just all blew out of the Big Bang, and that their momentum continued, and they've sort of formed in, because of gravitational forces, they formed into these orbits. Man, the odds of that are pretty low. That's like, you know, smacking a billiard table and all the balls stop spelling your name or something. It just seems to be sort of low odds. And so why is all this stuff moving? And why is it moving so precisely? And there's only two answers, really. One is luck, chance. The other one is that it was by design, by someone. And I go with the someone argument. You've also got the question of why is there anything at all? Why does anything exist? And you think about it, okay, why do I exist? Oh, because of my parents and because of what I eat and I don't know, bananas and bread and milk and cows and the earth and stuff. So I'm a dependent being. But if you think of dependent beings and you trace them all the way back, there's got to be something at the beginning that is an independent being. And the Greeks will call that the first cause of everything. And it's also the first cause of existence, because things don't just come into existence on their own. You've sort of asked the question, why does anything exist at all? And it's interesting you talk to the atheist about that. I mean, you have Peter Atkins, who I highly respect. He's written 70 science books. He says space-time generates its own dust in the process of its own self-assembly. Or Daniel Dennett says it pulls itself up by its bootlaces, creates itself ex nihilo, or almost out of nothing. And you go, hang on a minute, creates itself? If I came home tonight, Pete, and there was a big walrus sitting on my lounge room, I'd be like, where the heck did that come from? I wouldn't say it created itself, because just think about the logic of that. For a walrus to create itself, it has to exist before it exists and know that it doesn't exist and needs to have the resources to create it. It just makes no sense. And to say that the universe created itself is just comedy. And some will say, oh, trace it back and back and back. There must have been some first cause. And you go, well, okay, but you can't trace things back forever. But you can't have what they call an eternal regression. Because let's say I look up at a light that's hanging on a chain, and I go, oh, look, it's hanging on that link of the chain, and that's hanging on the next link, and that's hanging on the next link, and the next link, and the next link. Great, but it can't be links forever. There eventually has to be some kind of bolt that holds it to something. And it's like the old story, the guru goes to the astronomy lecture, and the astronomer says, it's all held up by gravity, and the guru goes, no, it's not. The Earth is on the back of a tiger, and that's on the back of a turtle.
Mm.
And the astronomer goes, hang on, well, what's the turtle standing on? And the guru says, you're a very smart young man, but you can't fool me. It's turtles all the way down.
Right.
And I told that story to my little 9-year-old daughter, and she goes, all the way down to what?
Yes.
And in some ways, that's the question. Like, what causes all this stuff? What causes existence? What causes precise movement of huge objects? There's got to be some first cause for it. And you can trace it back and back and back and back. just to chuck a quick story at you, I was on a plane one time, and this guy saw I was reading a Christian book, and he sort of jokingly gave me a bit of stick for it. He said, you're a Christian." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Like, is that okay? You know, am I still allowed to do that?" He said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "What about yourself?" He said, "Oh, hell no, I'm an engineer." And I'm like, "Okay, there's plenty of Christians who are engineers, but anyway, don't worry about that." He said, "I was trained to analyze reality." And I went, "That's cool. Okay, let me ask you my 4 questions about reality." Straight off the bat, I thought, why not? He's going to be upfront about this. He's probably a pretty, open, frank personality. I liked him, so I thought, let's go. And I said, first, and he said, "Go for it, shoot." He said, "I'm expecting a dumb Christian." And I said, "All right, well, does the universe exist?" And he rolled his eyes around. He said, "Good on you. Of course it." He didn't even look out the window to see if it was still there. He just said, "Of course it exists." I said, "Good, okay." Second question, has it always existed, or did it have a beginning? "Well, haven't you heard of the Big Bang?" Of course it had a beginning. If it had always existed, that would be impossible. It would have reached entropy by now. Everything would have cooled down. Nothing would be moving. All energy would have been expended. Da 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 da. Okay, cool. Yep, I agree. Third question, was the beginning of the universe caused or uncaused? And again, easy one. Science traces causality. It's all about causes. Of course, the beginning of the universe was caused. Okay, cool, thanks. Was the first cause of that universe, question 4, personal or impersonal? And that one slowed him down a bit. He sort of went, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, okay, imagine all the events that happen in the universe are happening. Now stop the film and roll the film right back to the beginning. What's the first thing that happened? Think of it as dominoes, if you like. All these dominoes falling and things. Stop. Roll it back. Go right back to the first domino. Now tell me about that first domino. Was it just a domino? Because if it was, how did it fall? Could it just have been a physical thing? Why would it then decide to fall? Or must it have been a personal thing to push the domino?" And he got it. And he went, by definition, the beginning of the universe must have been personal. And then he realized what a massive door he'd opened. And he sort of swore and he said, hang on, let me think about that for a minute here. But people have been thinking about that for thousands of years and going, look, there has to be a first cause of something. So it can't go back turtles all the way down. And the best attempt to disprove it by our good mate Lawrence Krauss, who I've interviewed and really like, he basically said it all came from nothing. He's written this book, A Universe from Nothing. I don't know if you've seen it, Pete. Have you seen that floating around?
Yeah.
Character of a guy, so entertaining. I've interviewed him twice and hung out with him. He's as funny as a fit. So much personality. But he's really gotten into a bunch of trouble because when he says the universe comes from nothing, what he really means is, to quote him, relativistic quantum field theoretical vacuum states. In other words, there's laws of physics there, and there's these sort of and he just doesn't account for it. You've got a lot of atheists who are going, sorry, look, you just haven't convinced us. And I quote those in the book. There's a bunch of them just saying a quantum vacuum is not nothing. It's something. There's all this stuff there that you call nothing at the beginning of the universe. And he sort of admits that later in the book. He says, oh, well, there was a bit of stuff there, but I'm not sure where it came from, but whatever. In other words, we need to go right back to the beginning and say, if you define the universe as all the stuff there is, right, a big lump of stuff, where did that come from? It can't have created itself. There must be something outside that lump of stuff. And it has to be non-material, otherwise it would be included in the universe. It has to be eternal. It has to be powerful enough to create a universe. And it has to be able to decide at some point in time to do so, because it hasn't been there forever. And that's starting to sound dangerously like someone that I say prayers to every morning. I mean, and again, it doesn't prove which God, but surely it makes some evidence pointing to the fact that there has to be something or someone out there with those characteristics. That's sort of a quick summary of chapter. What are we, 3?
I like how you keep coming back to it doesn't confirm which God. And again, that then brings it into the earthly realm, the God that the Greco-Judeo-Christian West has created can, if what's the word for it? Followed in the light of that being a benevolent God, following the New Testament thoughts on that, it can then produce a society that's more cohesive. And as we said earlier, this world right now could really do with some kind of cohesion. Just think about it: Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, disastrously polarized. And even within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, massive. I'm the polarization between the Fordites and the more conservative Conrad Vine or Ron Kelly style. They are as polarized as ever, but now the admin is polarized with both those groups. I think that, and we're talking a lot of esoteric sort of existential stuff today, but I think in looking at that big picture and then somehow reconfirming how it can be applied to our lives is really important, because I think we truly hope that once we have a significant and relevant alignment and playing out of these beliefs, they can't just be beliefs. They've got to turn into some kind of action. And unless that action turns into some kind of cohesive community, it's even more pointless. Just believing is even more pointless than ever, unless it's actually manifesting itself into some kind of cohesion. And to do that, and I hope that our discussion today prompts that kind of thought process where people can go, hey, what can I actually do to make my life, my neighbor's life, my community's life better? Not to seek salvation, not to necessarily even know God or which God, but to just use the ideas to bring about a better life for us all. It sounds a bit idealistic and naive on some levels, but the reality is, unless you process this information and turn it into action, it means nothing.
Yeah, agreed. And look, who's looking up at the stars tonight? Muslims are, Christians are, Jews are, Baha'is are, Buddhists are, and they're all going, wow, there's something behind all that, and surely that should pull us together rather than push us apart, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Surely we should agree on what we can. We might call it different things. We might have different views about it. I certainly have strong views about it. But that doesn't mean that people with other views are my enemy. It should mean that we agree on some of the basics. We share a taxi ride a long way towards the city.
Yeah, exactly. I think you may have mentioned that chapter 4 and 5 were perhaps the hardest to write, and in many ways, the content that you can find in both of those chapters isn't really stuff that I've seen other Christians write about. And I think you've called it the argument to God from consciousness. Can you just unpack that a bit more and summarize that for us?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's hard to say it simply, but let's have a crack. Let's imagine. I mean, you were talking before about, are machines conscious? Is AI conscious? I'm going to say no, it's not.
No.
And there's a classic thought experiment about that, where let's imagine you're in a room and you don't speak Chinese, you only speak English, but people are handing in notes in Mandarin, and you look at them and you're like, I don't know what the heck that means, but you've got some instructions in front of you, and the instructions say if a person hands in a card that says this with these pictures on it, then you hand out card number 27, hand it out to them. And then if they hand in one that looks like this, you hand out card 89, and you've sort of got this list of what to do in front of you, okay? So you hand those things out. And the people outside who are Chinese, they hand in questions, actually, although you don't know that, and you're handing out answers, but you can't understand them. And that's a John Searle experiment to say that's what it's like for a machine. A machine is in there. It doesn't know what the human's typing into it. It doesn't know what answers it's giving. It's only just doing what the algorithm tells it to do. And that's all I think AI will ever be able to do. It will look very human. It will sound very human, but it doesn't have consciousness. We have consciousness.
Yeah.
What is that? way too hard for me to define, but obviously it includes thinking, feeling. But I think the big one is experience. The big one, and they call it qualia, the word qualia. We have this thing called qualia. And to illustrate what that is, let's try to imagine, okay, you wake up in the morning and you find yourself hanging by your feet from the roof of a cave, and you drop off and you flap your wings and you fly. You can't see a thing, but you're perfectly safe because you can hear everything that's going on around you, and you have a map in your mind of that. And you catch a bug in your teeth and you eat it, and you stop again for a bit of a rest, and you call out, and the sound bounces off your wife's body, and you hear the fuzzy sound of, because she's so hairy, and the sound comes back with a nice distorted sort of guitar sort of thing, and you're like, baby, and you find that really attractive, your hairy wife, because of the way she sounds. And it's like, that's the life of a bat. Okay, and if I were the world expert in bats and I knew everything about bats, every molecule in their body, everything that they do and think and whatever, I still wouldn't know what it was like to be a bat. I wouldn't know what it feels like in the inner experience of a bat. And that's qualia. I don't know the qualia of a bat. I know my qualia.
Right, okay.
And so what we're saying is we have this thing called consciousness, and physical science can't reach that. I could put you in the most expensive brain scanning machine we have, and it wouldn't be able to scan what is going on in your mind, because your mind is a non-physical thing. And the atheists struggle like heck with that one, Pete. They don't want to admit that there's a non-physical thing in the universe, because, and I couldn't believe it. When I started reading up on this, I found the leading atheist philosophers say three things. One, you can't think about things. Number two, you don't have any identity. And number three, you don't have free will. And if you think I'm making this up, if you think I'm being unfair to them because I'm a Christian, whatever, read the books I quote in here. You've got some very, very serious people who say those three things. Like, for example, Alex Rosenberg, really good philosopher. He's written this book, The Atheist's Guide to Reality. And what he does, he says, it's impossible for humans to do those things. And if you think you're thinking, you're not. You're just imagining it. And if you think you have free will, you're kidding yourself. And if you think you have an individual personality, you're having a joke. And he tells you, and you go, hang on, why would such a brilliant man say that?
Who's the
and
guy?
The reason is,
sorry?
It's Alex Rosenberg, who wrote the book, An Atheist's Guide to Reality.
Right. Sorry to interrupt.
And no, not at all. And he's sort of saying, look, the trick is you can't think about other things because no physical thing can be about another physical thing.
Right.
And you go, hang on a minute, what do you mean? If I said, okay, this tissue is about Paris, you'd go, Gren, what are you smoking? What are you talking about? This tissue is just a tissue. It's not about anything. And that's correct. Physical things can't be about other things. But then what about my brain cells? My brain cells can't be about other things. And if my thoughts are only physical, then they can't be about other things. And so he's prepared to say that you can't think about things in order to defend his worldview, which is physicalism. And you just go, dude. And it's the same with free will. I mean, to put it simply, cells can't initiate anything. They can't decide things. They can only respond to stimuli. And so if all you are up there is cells, how can you have a free will? You can't. You can't have a free will at all. And Sam Harris, love the guy, but he writes this book, Free Will. And he says, you've got it? And he says, we don't, free will's an illusion. You think you have it, but you really don't. And I love it. I mean, it cracks me up. I was watching on YouTube. He goes to the atheist convention in San Diego or somewhere, and he says in his first sentence, and let me just read it to you. He says, I hope to convince you that free will is an illusion.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, he's twice in that one sentence, he's contradicted himself. Why? He hopes to convince me. Well, if he has to convince me, I must have free will. And if he hopes, well, he must have free will too. And you just go, Sam, you've trodden on a landmine. The instant you said that, of course we have free choice. But to admit that, he's got to say we're more than cells. There's a mind, there's a non-physical mind up there, not just the brain. And he doesn't want to go there. He just does not want to go there. And as far as individuality goes, all you are is just a bag of particles that have come from the Big Bang, and you're together for a while. But you can't alter the physical course of those particles any more than I can alter a billiard ball by thinking about it. Your mind, whatever that fluffy thing is, can't influence the real world of particles. So it's just an illusion. And these guys actually deny consciousness. I mean, these are the things that we know. If we know anything, we know that we're thinking. You know, there's one thing I'm sure about, and even the great philosophers, they're sure about not much, but they're sure about the fact that they're thinking. You know, the old "I think, therefore I am." But this all contradicts all of that. And you just go, guys, I'm sorry, but in trying to defend your materialist view of me, you've denied so many of the things about what it is to be a human. And they don't want there to be a non-conscious, a non-physical mind. They don't want there to be a soul. And so kind of they just completely deny what it is to be a human being. And I just go, that's such an unsatisfying account. I'd much rather believe that there are some non-physical things in the world that are real, but that for them that opens the door to, God forbid, there might be a God, and they don't want that to be the case. That's a very rushed and simple summary.
Yeah.
Let me just read you a couple of paragraphs. Atheist philosopher John Searle sees the problem: a universe that consists entirely of mindless, meaningless, unfree, non-rational, brute physical particles would hardly produce humans that are mindful, meaning-creating, free, and rational. But, to quote another writer, if humans were made in the image of God, who has consciousness, reason, self-determination, freedom, personality, relational ability, excuse me, and objective value, then we'd expect to have those characteristics too. And we do. And in a way, that sums up the whole argument for it. I haven't heard this argument made by Adventists since the late 70s, by Des Ford, actually. Plenty of other Christians make it really well. But I think it's a beauty. I think it's a cracker. And I've just given you a teaspoonful of it. But that's some of the main ideas.
Yeah. With that concept, the free will, the consciousness, the thinking, and this notion that God is with us, this Christian God that we've been talking about today, is with us and desiring us to have a more abundant life. Why isn't that manifesting itself on the planet? And is there some room to think, well, because of, you mentioned earlier, the fall, because of the entry of sin and the mistakes that Adam and Eve made, that we actually can never manifest a true alignment with this Christian God here on earth, and that is only for heaven? Or do you perhaps, like I hope, that we can I'm not talking about utopia, but I'd like to see it instead of in the gutter where it appears to be, and not for all. I mean, I love life. Honestly, I go to bed happy every night. I've got no complaints. I'm very content individual, and maybe I come by that genetically. I don't know, but I would like to think that we can have some large pockets of human existence that actually flow nicely, civil, kind, function well. But is that a pipe dream that a Christian can never hope to truly achieve on earth? What do you think? Are we relegated to having to wait till the afterlife?
Yeah, I think we can be reasonably happy down here. I mean, it helps to be born in a country with all the advantages we have, doesn't it? But, you know, I've traveled a bit. I've met people who are incredibly, I wouldn't say happy in a fluffy, superficial sense, but who are deeply content or joyful or something. In all kinds of circumstances. Yeah, because I guess they have peace knowing that they're loved, knowing that they try to love others, that they try to do their best. And maybe they have a different measure of what makes happiness. Maybe it's not my personal hedonism project. Maybe it's more just a sense of, have I shown as much love as I could today? And have I enjoyed doing it? You know?
Yeah.
It might even involve some sacrifice and some, you know, I don't know, some of the happiest times of my life, getting up to change a baby's nappy at 3 a.m. and you're changing, but you don't care. You know, like, what a great, your love for that kid is so overpowering.
So strong. Yeah.
You know,
And
that you
like you
just
said,
go,
you kind of wrote this book in many ways for your daughter. So in many
yeah,
ways, that you change for the man in the mirror. You
yeah, yeah,
try and make it change for you and your small world.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's some interesting
yeah.
things to ponder there. I want to just do
Mm.
one more question, and then I've noticed in the other chapters, they very much pertain to a lot of the questions that Peter Veach. So I'm just putting out a suggestion that we get back together in a couple of weeks, you, me, Peter Veach, and go through the rest of the chapters with some of his thoughts. So we're sticking to the content, but
Sure.
I just think I want to give them some time, and I don't want to race it. But you
Yeah,
tell
sure.
I think is it chapter 5? You tell a Sherlock Holmes story. What does that have to do with God? Are our minds the same as our brains, or is there any reason to believe we have a non-physical
Yeah,
part? This is quite a big
yeah,
point. Like,
yeah,
is there a soul or a mind? And most people who believe in any of the gods do have this kind of soul belief, don't they?
yeah, yeah,
What are your
yeah.
thoughts on that? And perhaps share the story of Sherlock Holmes as well, just to
Yeah. Ah, Pete, how long have we got? I mean, look, yes, most religions, there's two views of a person. One is you are just a physical being with a few maybe emerging things like thoughts and so on. But when you read the materialist philosophers, you're not even thinking, you don't have free will, and you don't have personal identity. That's losing a lot. Whereas the religious view of a person, including the Christian view, is that we have or are both physical and non-physical selves. Different terminology across religions for that. But basically, we're more than just matter. There's something non-material to us. To quote two atheists right up front, JBS Haldane, who came up with the terms primordial soup, he said, "It seems to me immensely unlikely that mind is a mere byproduct of matter. For if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose my beliefs are true. That may be sound chemically, but it doesn't make sense logically." And I think that's about right. Um, and the Sherlock question, I just sort of use that as an illustration. So Sherlock looks at a watch and he blurts out the fact that its owner was careless and took to drink and wasted a good inheritance and died poor. And
Mm.
Dr. Watson's like, what, how can you know that? And he's actually offended because it's actually his brother that we're talking about. And Sherlock goes, well, and he gives all the reasons as usual. Oh, well, I can see that it was carried in a pocket with keys, and it was expensive, but it's got pawnbroker marks all over it, so the person's finances have been up and down. And it seems he was drunk because he has scratches near the winder, and all this. And he says, I'm just following the logic.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, why do we trust Sherlock's logic? Well, number one, we know he's not on drugs. I mean, in actual fact, the early Sherlock Holmes stories have him using cocaine. He's a cocaine addict in those
Mm. Mm. Mm.
1887, whatever it is, stories. And Watson gets him doing detective work to try to get him off the drugs.
Right.
But if Sherlock was on drugs at the time, we wouldn't trust his thoughts, okay? Because we know that thoughts that are caused by physical causes, like drugs, vodka shots, an uppercut, or a really bad flu, might not be accurate. We know that. But materialism says that all thoughts are caused only by physical things, when clearly Sherlock's telling us that his thoughts follow logic. So why would the chemicals in a brain line up in a way, step by step, that follow the logic of, oh, there's scratches on a watch, therefore the owner was... How would chemicals do that? It just doesn't make sense. And Sherlock's thoughts also, they're reliable. And you wouldn't expect that, like Haldane says, if they were just physical properties. I mean, the classic on this is the story, we're traveling along in a train and we look out the window and it says, "Welcome to Wales." And we go, oh, we must be in Wales. But then a lady comes along with her iPhone and says, look at this. I filmed it this morning. Those rocks were just up the top of the mountain. They rolled down completely at random. Here's the footage. And they formed, isn't it amazing? They've just spelled out, looks like "Welcome to Wales." It spelled it out. Now you don't know where you are, because what you thought were things put there with a purpose are actually random and non-purposive. So why would you trust them? And you can see where I'm going to take that. If our
Mm.
minds were formed by random processes, or our brains, why would we trust their conclusions? C.S. Lewis puts it brilliantly. I'll just quickly read you that if I can. He says, Supposing there was no intelligence behind the universe and no creative mind. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. It's merely that when the atoms inside my skull happen for physical or chemical reasons to arrange themselves in a certain way, that gives me as a byproduct the sensation I call thought. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? It's like upsetting a milk jug and hoping that the way it splashes itself will give you a map of London. But if I can't trust my own thinking, then of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore I have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought. So I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. And you can see the catch there, right? If our brains are just these materially, randomly formed machines, why do we trust their thoughts? And there's a bunch of reasons. There's also, when you think about logic, Sherlock Holmes uses a lot of logic. What the heck is logic? Well, take something like the law of non-contradiction, right? Something has to be, this bottle can be a bottle, or things in the world can be this bottle or not this bottle. Okay, that's the law of non-contradiction. It can be A or non-A. Try to argue with that, and in about 5 seconds, you'll get yourself in a big hole and realize, no, these laws of logic hold in all situations at all times. But hang on a minute, they're not physical laws. Where are they written? They seem to be floating above reality like laws, which are always true. But where did they come from? Why do they govern reality? They just do. And so what we found there is that logic seems to be real but non-physical. Aha! We just found something real but non-physical. And this philosopher, a favorite of mine, Joshua Rasmussen, he says, without these things, there is then no reason for reason to be anywhere ever. Yet we can see by reason itself that reason is real. And from here we can see by reason that reason does not spring from non-reason. So only one option remains. Reason exists at the foundation of everything. And what he's trying to say is, there's not just a physical world, there's also non-physical stuff like maths, logic that Sherlock uses. And that points to realities beyond the physical world and thus opens up the door for a God. So that's where Sherlock sort of comes in, pointing at the fact that if we were just, materialist views of a person lead us to doubt our own logic because they wouldn't make sense. But a view, if a person has a non-physical mind that can handle non-physical logic and maths and things like that, well, then it's more likely that we would be usually rational.
Yeah.
There you go. That's 3-minute version.
Yeah. Lots of food for thought there. I think we'll leave it there for now because I don't want to shorten the conversation. Let's just make it a part 2. And I think you've created a very valuable document here that at the very least stimulates conversation and dialogue and I'm sure a lot of people think, what's this got to do with Adventism and my day-to-day faith? Well, actually, it's the engine room of your understanding and how you then practice. And the better you understand this kind of topic, the better you can actually put your beliefs into practice and not just follow along like a sheep. And one of the things that you've heard me talk a little bit about is that some movements and some elements of Adventism suppress this kind of questioning. I was very lucky. I was 7 years old. Dr. Eric Magnuson, who I'm sure you know of, and he sadly passed, and one of his sons is a good mate of mine, and we grew up together. Literally, I'm 7, he's our neighbor, and he came into Sabbath school one day and basically by the end of it encouraged me to always ask the question why. And I thought at age 7 I was coming into a movement. I mean, Des Ford was probably living on campus around that time as well, and Norm Young and Dr. Lindsay and Salem and all these incredible minds. My dad, you've got similar family connections, and I think your father was quite along the similar lines of seeking communities that were grace driven. So I grew up thinking that, I was going to be able to ask the question why, but I soon found in Sabbath school and high school and college that you can't. And one of the sad things about this book that I often bring up, by incredible authors like Jonathan Butler, who will be on the show next week, George Knight, McAdams, Gilbert Valentine. There's just some incredible. They were asking why. They're just questioning. They're just looking at some thought processes. It discouraged me, though I knew it would happen, that the book was taken off the shelves, and I just think there's nothing to fear. Ellen White herself said, "Agitate, agitate, agitate." She was speaking to some Bible students, and I can't remember where it was, but she's actually quotes, question all these things, and I think truth can withstand scrutiny. And sometimes, I noticed someone there said, thinking too much led Satan into peril or whatever. I don't think you can think too much. I do think people can navel gaze too much. I think the thinking has to turn into action. But yeah, I really thank you for coming on the show today and for sharing. We've gone through half of the book, perhaps, sharing your ideas and thoughts, and for stimulating this kind of conversation, which I personally welcome, and I hope that those viewing also do the same. We're going to come back in a couple of weeks and look at the rest of the book. We've been talking to Grenville Kent and looking at his latest book, bringing up on the screen there, God Walks into a Bar. And I'll just bring it up a little bit larger there. You can get that on Kindle easily. I think it cost me around $10 on Kindle. Like you said, Grenville, you'll get maybe $1 or $2 of that. Amazon takes a lot. But it is doing very well. It has reached number one once or twice at least on the Christian philosophy category. And good on you. Congratulations and well done. And here's to more conversations. And let's get you back next week's book, but maybe the week after. And
enjoyed it, Pete. Thanks for the chat.
Same time. Look at Thursday again. And just a quick plug again, everybody. Tomorrow, Clinton Baldwin is our guest presenter. You must watch we no longer go live here. It's in our new channel, Good News Fellowship. Sorry, I brought up the wrong. Here it is. We've got our own YouTube channel. It's tiny, but it's refreshing. It's looking at the good news of the gospel, and you just go to YouTube at Gospel Good News Fellowship. That kicks off at 6:30 p.m. Thursday Pacific Time, USA, and Australia here lunchtime on Friday. And next week, John Butler himself will be on the show on the first interview. Second interview will be with Andrea McMahon, who's watching today. Can't wait to chat again, Andrea. And then next week, at some random point, John Rosier will be discussing what Adventism could have been. So that's going to be an interesting one as well. Well, until next time, Grenville, what a great conversation. Thanks for taking the time and sharing this important topic with us. And good luck with the book.
Enjoyed the chat. Yeah, thanks, man.
Talk soon.
Catch you later.